20 Vision podcast.
The defining decade. All right. Welcome and thank you for tuning in to the 20 Vision podcast, the show where we help 20-somethings navigate the defining decade. I'm your host, Colin, and it is good to be back, people. I want to thank you for tuning in to another episode. It's great to have you listening, whether you're an avid listener or this is your first time tuning in. Guys, we've taken a bit of a break, almost 3 months. I'm also on my fourth time trying to record this. My system keeps stopping the recording at 11 minutes, so I really hope this is the last go-around. Just needed to take a little break between the last few. But yeah, everyone, we did take a bit of a break headed into the new year. We did 3 months consecutive of an episode per week. I was very happy with that, but wanted to take some time. I didn't feel as creative or, I didn't like that. I felt like I was putting out something similar on my end every time. I think our guests are really what made the podcast, but I wanted to be doing better and kind of switch the format on my end. So I took some time to think about that, then got a little lazy around the holidays, and here we are. And you may be watching me via video. Got this cool new setup, new camera, new mic stand, stuff like that. So that's exciting. So we'll be on YouTube. Hopefully we'll have some video content on social media as well. But I want to talk about the new format that we're going to have everyone on the podcast, as well as then we can get into our topic for the day. So the main changes that we're making. First off, episodes are going to be weekly on Thursday mornings at 8 a.m. That's different than the Fridays at 8 that we did before. Just want to test that out more to see how viewership goes and listening. There's going to be more of a mix of having guests on and solo episodes with me. And I hopefully will have, co-hosts during those episodes. I thought that the episode with my friends Nigel, John and I, flowed really well. And I think that when we have guests on the podcast, that having other hosts could help with the conversation and really allowing things to flow. So that's another change. And the last one that's kind of major, in terms of the structure of the podcast and who we will have on, we've been really privileged to have some amazing guests in their 20s. But I do want to branch out a bit more and invite some people on who might not be in their 20s that could shed some light on lessons they learned, advice they have, and how they got to where they are right now, through things that happened in their 20s. So we actually changed the beginning of the podcast. You'll note that I say the 20 Vision podcast, the show where we help 20-somethings navigate the defining decade, versus previously it was the 20 Vision podcast, the show where we interview 20-somethings to see how they're navigating the defining decade. So that doesn't mean we're not going to have guests on who are in their 20s. We're still going to do that. It's probably going to be our main guests, but we are going to integrate some people who may be a bit more experienced and older and can shed some light on what they were doing in their 20s to get them to where they are now. So that's the changes that we have. Hopefully you'll see me more on social media. I want to post some video content on not only Instagram, but TikTok as well. Just to try and grow the podcast as much as possible. I really liked doing this, even though I did just take a significant break, but I like doing this podcast. I love doing the show. I want as many people as possible to see it. And you guys have always helped with sharing and giving me your feedback. So please continue to do that. And, I'll hopefully have some more content out there for you to enjoy. But let's get into the topic for today's episode. And I thought it would be fitting to start out the year and kind of going through this again by touching on 3 of the top things that I learned in 2021. Now, in the past, I feel like I've done the cliche, I've learned so much this year, I've grown so much, but 2021, I really feel like pen to paper, like that actually happened. Like from the beginning of the year where I was to right now, I feel like I've completely changed in a lot of good ways, and took a lot of great lessons from this year in a crazy year that affected all of us differently based on kind of the state of the world that we're in right now. So I want to touch on these 3 things, and hopefully you can gain something from them. I think they're super helpful in my day-to-day now and in what I'm doing. I definitely need to integrate some of these things a little bit more right now, and I'm starting to, but I think you guys can hopefully take something from this. But If you're listening right now, head on over to Instagram, shoot me a DM or leave a comment on the post for this episode. I want to know what you guys learned this year, what some of your big takeaways were. But let's get right into it. The first thing I learned this year, and a lesson I really took, is that overwhelming and sometimes unrealistic positivity is critical. And what do I mean by that? There are plenty of moments during our day where we make a mistake. We feel like we did something awkward in a social interaction. We look back and feel like we could have handled things better. And this overwhelming and unrealistic positivity is critical. And that is just trying to make minor changes in your thinking and daily verbiage to realize that there is positivity and lessons that can be learned from some of these awkward or seemingly negative situations. I think the beginning of this year, I didn't start great. I was very confused about, what I was doing socially, with work, with dating, not thinking I was good enough at my job, not thinking I was in good enough shape, stuff like that, really stressing out about things. And I wake up full of anxiety. And some days I would literally just lay in bed and like cry for the first 15 minutes of the day. It was difficult, and I didn't have a positive mindset. Everything was inherently negative, whatever was going on. And I didn't do a good job at realizing that every day of our lives, we're going to go through things that make us better going forward. But especially it feels like in your 20s, that's really difficult to understand and to like fully grasp that some of the crazy stuff that's going on right now is going to benefit you in the future. And I just took everything as a negative, and everyone around me, my closest friends, and I'll say my mom was probably the biggest person in my ear about fixing that mentality, which really helped out. And I think over time, this is something that takes, a little bit of muscle memory. You got to build this up. And I have a few tips that we can hopefully use, that you can hopefully use to change this mindset. But, the first one is, in the moment, take these difficult situations that you can be in as a learning experience. Really try and sit back and think, if you made a mistake at work, okay, this is a bummer. I feel pretty bad now. I'm just going to move on because I know now that I made this mistake, I'm not going to do it again. That's just a simple one. And then I think reflecting back as well on moments that might be bothering you long term. Like, we can all think of those things that happened a few months ago or a few weeks ago that like still it pops in your head and you're like, oh my God, I can't believe I just did that, and stresses you out. I think looking back at those moments and situations where you weren't happy with what you were doing or how things went, and saying, okay, what did I learn from that, and how is it affecting me now? I think the affecting me now piece is so important, because it changes that like moment or incident from, oh my God, this is like just so awful and awkward, I can't believe I did that, every time I think of it I'm stressed out, to, oh my gosh, that's interesting because I made a mistake. And the positive side of it is it's over now, and I haven't made that mistake since then. Or I've changed my thinking. I've changed my mindset a certain way that I'm not going to do that again. And I'm such a believer in that, there are hard times and hard things that happen, but you're here now. You've gone through hard things previously. You have to see that on the other side of what you're dealing with right now is something positive. And then finally, I think this is a really easy tip that takes being very conscious of it in the moment, but it's trying to remove negative phrases and sayings from your vocabulary and social interactions. The way I think of this is, socially, it's really easy to start a conversation with something negative. Oh, how's your day? Oh, you won't believe what happened. Oh, the classic, like, going back into the office on a Monday. How was your weekend? Oh, not long enough. Yeah, we're here, got to work again, blah, blah, blah. Stuff like that. Switch your thinking, start conversations positively. Don't just say things or act like things are negative because everyone else is doing it. It's easy to fall into that trap and continue to talk like that, and it can really compound, and then everything you're talking about is negative. So that's the first one. Really try your hardest in these moments where it seems unrealistic to be positive, to, pull something out of it, because it'll mitigate that anxiety in the long term. The next is that momentum and habit is key. I am not a science or a physics person, but we've all heard that, Newton's first law of motion, an object in motion stays in motion. I think this goes both ways. Once you start doing positive things and continue to do them, you build up great habits and things go well. And I'm also a believer that the more you do good, the more you do things, for yourself in a positive way, uh, eat right, work out, be kind to others. That's just going to keep happening more. It's going to become second nature. I also think that unfortunately there's a negative side to this momentum and habit. The more that you're lazy, the more that you think negatively, the more that you don't do the right thing in certain situations, that becomes habit. That becomes easy to do too. So I think I learned both of those things this year. Luckily, more positively so than negative. But habits are formed in as little as 18 days. That is not a lot of time, and consistency can lead to a lot of growth for you. So I think in the moments where the easiest way to break your momentum is you've been consistent for a few days and there's some temptation in your life that could move you off track, knowing in your head that, okay, I've been eating really good. This one day of messing up my diet and the short term, happiness that I may feel is going to mess up this momentum. I start all over again at square one. And that was easiest for me to learn with 75 hard. For 75 days, I had to eat a certain way. I had to work out a certain amount of times. I had to stay consistent and disciplined. I formed habits. And over time, all of a sudden, things compound quickly. I see massive gains in both my physical health, my mental health, my overall health, how I looked, my confidence, everything like that. So know that once you start, the hardest part is keeping that train going, but once you do it, you will see the fruits of your labor come to fruition. And then finally, I want to touch on the fact that, and I had heard this at the end of 2020, I didn't really pick up on it until 75 hard was over. 1 year is short term in the game of life. 75 hard for me was about 3 months. That's super short term. In 75 days, I was able to lose almost 50 pounds. And in a year, here are a few things that I was able to do. I did that. I lost almost 50 pounds. I started this podcast. I was promoted at work, moved into my first apartment. I'm in a great relationship right now. I felt like I grew with my friends even more than I ever had. I read and listened to 10 books. Those are like a few goals, some small, some large. None of it's to brag, just to show that, wow, that was all accomplished in 1 year. Things happen fast once you get going. And I think this is tied to the momentum piece that, you can make the best or the worst of the year that you're given, and looking out at the year, it can be daunting to think, wow, this is, I had plenty of time to do these things, or a year is not enough time to make this change, but it is. And it goes by fast, and the gains you make in a year and the positive changes you make in your life, that is all done in the short term, which is pretty incredible, because I don't think we often look at it like that. So I think long-term goals should be looked at over years, and short-term goals are over like your 1 year that you have or your few months in front of you. It's really not that long of a time to make some serious change, which is kind of funny. That's like a bit of an oxymoron. It's like, it's not a lot of time, but you can do a lot in that time, if that makes sense. I don't know. Maybe I'm just rambling. Maybe I haven't gotten on the mic in a little bit. But those are 3 of the lessons that I learned, guys, over the course of this year. I hope you found some value in this podcast today. I'm excited to get after this again. We will have a guest next week, and we'll get back into the swing of things there. But you can find the podcast on Instagram at 20 Vision Pod. That is 20 Vision Pod. I'd love if you gave the page a follow so you can keep up to date on new episodes. I'll have some more content out over the course of, getting back into this now, some video on there too. And I appreciate you listening as always. And I look forward to bringing a new episode of the 20 Vision podcast to you next week.